Hello to everyone watching around the world. This is CUSA All Access. I'm Dylan Simmons alongside Ryan Martinovich. We have a special guest this week. Matt Hayden could not be here, so we get Mr. Ethan Odom making his MTN on-air debut. Ethan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dylan. Nice to be here today. Thank you.
Yes, sir. A very talented individual. Check out a lot of his good stuff. We'll get into that later as well. And Ryan, I'm sure we're getting ready for another exciting week of CUSA action, as always.
Well, we already got 2 games kicking off right now as we speak, and 2 more down the road tomorrow. Of course, MTSU being on a bye week, so a lot of midweek action. Not a lot to cover on Saturday and Sunday, but gotta love starting out the gate early.
Yeah. So, and last week we were on a bye week, much like the football team is on a bye week this week. We didn't have CUSA All Access because we were on fall break, but Middle Tennessee did play against Liberty, so we all kind of saw what happened in that matchup. And, it was really close for the Blue Raiders. They almost were able to pull it out, but things just didn't work out in the end.
Yeah, 42-35 was the final score. And Liberty's quarterback, Caden Salter, threw 2 touchdown passes, added on with 160 yards.
But that ground game, almost 400 yards on the ground. Quentin Cooley ran all over the Blue Raider defense.
All over 'em.
And he had too many fourth quarter turnovers, a lot of inconsistencies in the play calling, it seemed. It just was not in the favor of the Blue Raiders finishing the game. We've seen that, though. Blue Raiders now have kind of spoiled themselves in the second half, especially the fourth quarter with the turnover bug.
Yeah, that's been a real issue for them this year, and it's a recurring theme time and time again. It's like Groundhog Day. It just keeps happening over and over because the Raiders will play good in the first half. But in the second half, it's almost like there was a head coach who said this one time. I can't remember his name. He was a coach on the 60s Philadelphia Eagles. He said the second half was a horse from a different fire department, because that's exactly what happened for the Blue Raiders. Because in the second half, they started off well in the third quarter. They were able to keep pace with Liberty. They even had a 35-28 lead. But really, it was the fourth quarter where things got off the rails because they turned the ball over at least twice. It was 3 times total in the second half, but I think it was 3 times in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, two fourth quarter interceptions with a downfall.
And that hurt to see in the end. And it's tough because Middle Tennessee has had that same problem reverberate throughout the season, and it just crops up again. So it's tough for them, but I think they understand the problem. It's just a matter of finding a way to fix it and get back to what they should be. But bad habits sometimes, they're hard to shake.
Well, like anything, it's 8 games down now. You're 2/3 of the way through the season. You're trying to fight for a bowl game. You'd think you'd have it figured out by now, but it's difficult trying to pick the pieces, mold the team this late in the season to find the fundamentals that win you ball games, especially late down the stretches, fourth quarter in particular. What is fundamentally going wrong for them in the decision-making process? Are the coaches giving up on them right now? What's going on? But you're seeing it a lot these days that teams are still struggling to find a consistent rhythm throughout the game, and I just don't know what it is to say it's not affecting MTSU. It's affecting a lot of teams around the nation.
Yeah.
But kind of like how Ryan was saying, our offense here in the middle, they were stalling in that fourth quarter. Especially those last 2 drives. We could pick it up a little bit, but it's usually during that second half where we usually mess up and throw interceptions, fumbles, penalties. There's just a lot of cleanup, but I feel like we can pick it up headed into the next week's game against New Mexico State.
Yeah, I think they can pick it up. And what I will say about this game is that although it ended badly for the Raiders, there is still a lot for them to be proud of because they took a Liberty unit that is currently undefeated, 7-0, 5-0 in CUSA play, and they took a defense that had held FIU to 3, Jacksonville State to 13, New Mexico State to 17, and they put 35 on them. Now, granted, some of that was the fact that Liberty made a lot of mistakes, especially in the first half. I think Salter fumbled at least once, and I think they fumbled a couple times in total, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, the first play out the gate for Liberty was a fumble that led to an MTSU touchdown. But they were able to make adjustments, at least on the offensive end, of being able to continue that ground game that was so explosive against the Blue Raiders, especially in the second half. And then, of course, pick apart Vadiato towards the end there. Once again, those second half adjustments who was going to be the better team coming out of the break, and it was definitely Liberty.
Yeah, and again, Liberty proved that they've got championship DNA inside. They proved that they are a team that knows how to get the job done. Some teams know how to win games, and Liberty, I mean, it sounds, kind of simple to say, but they knew how to win that game. They knew what they needed to do to overcome the difficulty, and they didn't let the trials and tribulations they faced overwhelm them. And it's not like Middle played bad. I mean, Vadiato had 332 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, 24 for 37. So we had a solid game. If you take away the fourth quarter, you would say that that's a winning performance. And in all theory, it probably should have been. But the combination of the defense kind of relenting a little bit and a few mistakes, sometimes that's all that takes, especially against a very tough team such as Liberty.
Yeah, and they're still, of course, on the outside looking in for the top 25 rankings,
Yep.
And still trying to make a case for themselves being one of the better group of 6 teams trying to get that New Year's 6 bowl game. And they still got James Madison and Air Force in front of them trying to make their case. It's going to be tough down the road. Can they finish 12-0 and make a case? We deserve to be in the Cotton Bowl, the Fiesta Bowl, or whatever this year.
Yeah, I feel like that's hard in Conference USA too, because the level of competition is a little bit more even, I feel like, in the conference than it is in other conferences. So it makes it a little bit tougher when it comes to going undefeated and beating that competition, especially when you're probably going to have to play the same team twice in the Conference USA Championship, which they probably will have to do. But right now they're playing Western Kentucky, and I mean, that's a pretty seismic game as well, guys.
Well, yeah, of course, it's obvious for them having to play at least one team twice because there are only 8 other teams in the conference with them. So they play 8 regular season games, and then you're guaranteed to play one of those 8. You
got to play somebody else.
Depending on who finished probably behind you, because they're looking like they're going to be the number 1 team anyway.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it's really necessarily because it's an even playing field. I mean, you look at the Sun Belt and the Mountain West this year. I mean, you had top to bottom some serious teams. Texas State looking great, big turnaround for them, and like I said, Air Force. We also got Wyoming, Fresno State. Boise State looking a little bit better this year. And there's another team I'm blanking on right now. But overall, I would argue that competition honestly might be just slightly better in the Sun Belt, given the fact how well James Madison has played coming up from the FCS. But of course, hats off to Jacksonville State because they've also kind of made the same kind of transition 1 year after James Madison, and has looked just as good. So that level is coming up through the ranks to the CUSA, but I think overall it's still out in the Sun Belt and the Mountain West. You're finding better competition, and eventually I'm sure Liberty will decide to move on once they figure that out.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, with Jacksonville State, they used to play in the Ohio Valley Conference.
They did.
So they used to always control that conference all the time. So they moved out of a couple conferences before they came to the CUSA.
I think so.
Atlantic Sun was one of them. And
they were in the ASUN.
Yeah.
And was it the SoCon?
No, they weren't in the SoCon. It was mostly just the Ohio Valley and the Atlantic Sun, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, because they overruled a lot of people. I used to watch them growing up, and they were just good. Always good.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We had this discussion, but, country singer Riley Green was a quarterback for Jacksonville State, so I was...
Always helps when you have celebrities on your team.
Exactly.
I mean, that's going to put the eyes on the product.
Absolutely.
Trace Atkins was at the MTSU Louisiana Tech game the other night.
Really?
I don't know if I mentioned
Awesome.
that, but yeah, he came by. I actually, if I'm not mistaken, I was in the elevator with him. Mm-hmm. He is a tall guy.
Yeah.
I've met him twice in my life.
Yeah.
For some reason, MTN just continues to stumble upon Trace Atkins. It was my first high school game with MTN, actually my first week with MTN Sports, and he came in to do a promo for us. It's somewhere in the MTN storage vault that we keep hidden deep in a bunker somewhere so that nobody can use it. But it was pretty cool. But he's a tall guy, very deep voice, deepest voice you ever heard. He's like. Hello, I'm Trace Atkins, you're watching MTN Sports.
Very gruff, very gruff.
Yeah, very gruff, but cool guy, and he's a fan of MTSU football, and I guess Conference USA football by that virtue. So hey, cool stuff there. But there's some other sports action besides the football, and I know that volleyball is having some big stuff happening right now with Western Kentucky dominating, right?
Yeah, I mean, Western Kentucky, of course, has pretty much been the premier volleyball team in CUSA for the last 20 years.
Yeah.
But, I mean, they got some competition this year right now with UTEP and MTSU in particular. I mean, right now, UTEP and MTSU are tied for second. CUSA, of course, they're going to have a big weekend series coming up on Friday and Saturday trying to figure out who's going to be number 2 behind Western Kentucky. And, of course, Danica, what was her name? Danica Washington? Danica Washington and Kayla Kohler
Yeah.
were named CUSA award winners this week. Danica Washington for her outstanding defensive play, and of course, Kayla Kohler being a CUSA freshman of the week, an outstanding setter in her own right. So it's going to be some tough competition for MTSU coming up this weekend.
Yeah, and I was very curious about this matchup as well because these are the two teams who are second and third in the conference right now.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I found interesting is that Western Kentucky has played UTEP. I think they played them at home earlier on this season. But one team they haven't played yet is Middle, and they're going to have to play Middle Tennessee on the road. I think you might disagree on this one, but I'm curious what you have to say because I think that Middle Tennessee might be their toughest in-conference road matchup this season.
It's tough to say. All CUSA volleyball, the competition is stout. I mean,
Yeah.
Day in, day out, you don't know whether or not you're going to win. It's whoever grinds it out 3 sets, who comes out on top. I would say MTSU is definitely going to be a tough matchup for them, but historically speaking, in Alumni Memorial, MT has had some struggles with Western Kentucky. Of course, last year they ended up sweeping the Blue Raiders out the gate, and of course that was a different team, but you still have some solid players this year if you're Western Kentucky, Paige Briggs, Kaylee Cox, Kaylee Bauer. I mean, all these individuals who have been leading this team. Kennedy Coyle, they are going to be a tough for the Blue Raiders to shut down, but Coach Crawford has had plenty of opportunity to set up this year's team. I mean, already surpassing the win total from last year.
Yeah.
Kayla Henley is having another terrific year. Kaylee Oxygen doing great on the block. Adri Rhoda having another superlative sophomore season. Aaron Eisenhart defensively coming in from Austin P has been great at the libero position, taking over for Marley Banton. So, I mean, it's another solid team for Coach Crawford and the Blue Raiders, but I would argue that they definitely will give the Hilltoppers a run for their money.
I think it'll be a fun one to watch. And you talked about Middle Tennessee. One thing I love about this matchup against UTEP is the star power. There are a lot of big names on both sides that are doing huge stuff when it comes to overall CUSA statistics. You talked a lot about who MTSU's got. Kaylee Oscarson has, and as well as Kayla Weaver for UTEP, they have the 3rd and 4th best hitting percentage in the conference. Yeah. You've got Kayla Henley, the 3rd most service aces, 36, and Taylor Iser leads the CUSA in total assists, 887. Now, I'm no volleyball expert, but that sounds like a lot of assists. So, one thing I am curious, though, about is because they have not played since last Tuesday against UNC Asheville. Yeah. So, that's a bit of an extended break. And I kind of want both of your opinions on this because you both kind of watched the volleyball team play. Do you think that kind of long extended break is going to affect them in any way?
I think it does all the works of positive. I mean, it's like a bye week for football. I mean, you get the opportunity, first off, to rest your legs, which is very important in this day and age, but it also gives you the opportunity to really, scout out your opponent coming in for a 2-game series. So, it gives you time to rest and recover, but also study up on your opponent. So I think it does nothing but help you in the long run.
Yeah, kind of like Ryan was saying before, like you need rest, you need time to get back, on the court, on the floor, and be able to come out and play with high intensity like they do every game. Every game I've been to, they won in all 3 sets, literally. Like they've destroyed every team. But
undefeated at home.
Yeah.
And you mentioned Taylor Iser. I mean, she's also top 10 in assists per set, which is another stat you really want to look at. Like, how often is she setting up her teammates? 11 assists per set is an incredible clip. But I mean, this has been going on for 4 years now for Taylor. Just an incredible athlete, and she really is the one that keeps the Blue Raiders' offense in system, and someone that they look forward in meetings, on the bench, and coming out to really set up the plays. Because first off, if you watch any highlight, the biggest thing, of course, is the slide attack she and Oscarson have. All right, fake out to the left, Oscarson goes back to the right, slams it across court. I mean, it is one of the hardest things to stop for any defense that is opposing the Blue Raiders. It's incredible.
So I am curious because, guys, basketball is coming up soon. Have you guys been keeping track of the preview and the stuff they've been saying, especially about MTSU?
First off, didn't they mention that something about being top of the preseason poll? I feel like I heard somewhere. Which I thought was an interesting take. I like it.
Yeah.
But I also think I'm curious to know what you guys think of that.
I mean, they're on top in both polls right now, men's and women's.
I understand the women's without show, and Coach Hensel has done a great job with that group coming off of a round of 64 loss, unfortunately, to Colorado last year, but a 30-plus wins, USA regular season and conference titles. So and pretty much just about everybody's returning from that team. Yeah,
and with the men's team, it was, like you mentioned, it was an interesting thing to see them on top of the poll because last year, as we know, they didn't end up winning the championship. But if you remember, Florida Atlantic, who made the Final Four last year, MTSU beat them right here in Murphy Center. They were the last team to beat Florida Atlantic in the regular season, and they were the last team to beat them before they got all the way to the Final Four. So they've got that little bit of history to work with, and they only got eliminated in the tournament by Florida Atlantic. That might play into that a little bit, just kind of that short memory from what they saw last year. But we can't discount the talent that this MTSU team has. You've got Cameron Weston, Elias King, both of whom are preseason CUSA All-Americans. And you've got, last year Weston had the most assists on the team with 91. He had the second most points. And with Eli Lawrence leaving, they need somebody like Weston to step up. I think that he's going to. And when you look at the talent across USA, you've got guys like Kyle Rode for Liberty. You've got guys like Brandon Newman and Deontay Allen for Western Kentucky who are going to be challenges. But I think that MTSU has the talent to take them on. It's just a matter of executing and playing to that ability that I think we all know that they can.
Well, and you also got to look at, the teams that are still left in CUSA. First off, North Texas is coming off another great season last year. Of course, unfortunately, Grant McCaslin, who was the head coach from last year's squad, who's led them to a couple NCAA tournament berths, is now coach at Texas Tech. But, of course, Sam Houston, who I think had 26 wins last year out of the WAC, coming in. They're going to be a tough basketball squad to go up against. So I'm curious to see how those two teams kind of play against the Blue Raiders, of course, how they play in their non-conference schedules going into CUSA action, because I feel like those are probably going to be the two toughest competitors for the Blue Raiders.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I feel like both of these teams, men's and women's, they'll both make the tournament, but they're going to have to play, really, really good throughout the season. The schedule looks easy, but it's actually not. Basketball is a totally different sport. It's like when you go to March Madness and you have this, random school that nobody knows about, smaller conference schools, and then they come out and beat Kentucky. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
What was that one school with the Peacock? Was it?
St. Peter's.
St. Peter's.
St. Peter's, yeah.
Doug Edert was the savior of that team, man. I still have him as like my fantasy football. Like he's my screensaver for my fantasy football team, just because that post game interview he had, just that smile on his face, the mustache.
Yeah.
Doug Edert, man, was the great.
It's a quintessential moment right there.
Really was.
So in basketball, I feel like anything can happen, but I feel like these two teams are the ones to do it.
I think that they definitely have the talent to do it. When you look at who they've got on the roster, like we mentioned, we look at the coaches, Nick McDevitt, Rick Insell, they've been around the block a few times. They know how to get the job done. And especially for the women's team, last year losing in the first round to Colorado, you've got to think that's going to motivate them a bit. Even though that they got to that point, I think that the fact that they lost in the way they did, they're going to use that as motivation going into this next season to see just how good they can be and see if they can surpass those limits. And this is not a detriment to Conference USA, but I think that when you look at the quality of teams that we had last year compared to what we have this year, you touched on it a little bit as well, it's not really the same level that we had before. A lot of those tougher teams have moved on to the American or other conferences, and that plays into it. I think that the people who ranked MTSU at the top of both have realized, hey, those same teams, those heavy hitters, they're not really around anymore. So who's the safest bet? And I think with women's it was obvious, but with men's they were like, well, we know what they're capable of, and it's a very similar team. Let's put them at the top of the poll. And granted, as we all know, preseason rankings usually never end up right because, just look at the AP Top 25 for college football, and you'll see what I'm talking about. But the fact still stands that that is a big sign for MTSU, and I think a great sign for them.
Yeah, I think it's a good point to never really, keep in mind for the preseason poll what it means, and he's really kind of coming off of last year's results, who's all returning, who all transferred, coach change. There's a lot of factors in those rankings that really don't mean squat when you get into postseason play. But it does give you an idea of where your team might stand up. But, it's like the Volunteers right now are scheduled number 1 in the preseason poll for the SEC in basketball. Who knows how that might turn out? They've had too many inconsistencies the last couple of years where I think they should win the conference. Offense gives them up, can't hit the free throws, or finally they're making threes, but that defense, they go out and score 85, their defense gives up 86. Things happen, players are injured, coaches are suspended, things happen. The ball, it gets hit with a puff of wind from the fan that just fell over. Stuff happens that you can't really control. Take those polls with a grain of salt, but it's interesting to see them at the top.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's going to be interesting to see how it all works out, but I'm going to actually make a quick prediction here, and you guys can feel free to chime in on yours. I think that we're going to get MTSU versus Western for the men's tournament championship. I think that's what we're going to get. I think it'll be Middle versus Western. Liberty is kind of in that same realm, but I think that Middle Tennessee and Western, it's going to be 100 miles of hay for the championship. And who knows, maybe we get a rematch in women's again, because that's what we had last year also. So, I mean, you guys have anything different, maybe thinking Liberty or somebody else?
Well, I think Liberty is an interesting choice because, coming out of the ASUN, Richie McKee has always had his teams playing well. They're constantly up for grabs for NCAA tournaments. I mean, they had an upset a couple years ago against Mississippi State in the tournament.
Yep.
So they're always going to be a threat. Once again, how do you play up to CUSA competition? I think the Atlantic Sun had some great basketball squads. So they could definitely make a case in the postseason play. Like I said, it's tough for me to put any stock in MTSU just yet, not being able to see what they look like on the court, even in some practices yet.
Fair enough.
Honestly, if I were looking at, down the line, the schedules, who I would really have up there, I honestly think North Texas would probably be the tough. Is the team
right.
team that you go through first go forward for the CUSA tournament. I'd say North Texas and honestly, like I said, Sam Houston.
Well, North Texas isn't in CUSA.
You're right. But you're right. Why did I forget that? I don't know. We've had this discussion.
There's so many teams that have come and gone.
I know. But you're right. North Texas is not in there, but they.
Right idea.
Why was I thinking that? No, but I think honestly, my point stands about Sam Houston though.
Yeah.
I do like Sam Houston as one of the teams to get through. We're all talking Texas squads. We're all talking Texas.
Oh, yeah.
Squads. So Sam Houston, I think, is the team to get through first go.
All right. Sam Houston. I like it.
I'm exactly the same way with Sam Houston. They have a good football program. Not doing really good this year, but over the last couple of years, they went to the FCS championship.
They did.
Won that in football. But like I said, basketball and football are totally two different sports. Two different sports in general. So I think that Sam Houston, was rated a little low. But
I can see that.
I actually think they're a really good team. Like, they just sound like they're a really good basketball program.
Okay.
I think the school is for basketball. That's what I think. So.
All right. Well, giddy up Sam Houston. We'll see how it all works out. By the way, exhibition game for the Middle Tennessee women's basketball team coming up this Friday out in Murphy Center. So for all you Middle fans, feel free to come out to the Glass House and see what's going to happen. Should be a fun one there. But, guys, there's also been some other big news happening just around the country. Did you hear about what happened for Middle Tennessee men's tennis? We had a certain player who got some success.
Leo Rakeen.
Rakeen, yeah. Won the ITA Ohio Valley Regional Championship. And I don't know when the last person to do that was, but that's a massive accomplishment. He's going to play in San Diego this November, I think in just a couple weeks, and the guy was really good. He didn't lose a single set until the final round against, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I might not get this guy's name right, so Paul Lato, and if I said your name wrong, I apologize, from Memphis is the guy he met in the finals and got the championship win pretty easily. So congratulations, Leo, getting out there and showing that Middle Tennessee men's tennis is still going to be a force in the future, even with just 4 teams in the CUSA.
Yeah, it's actually going to be an interesting kind of landscape, how not having as many teams in the postseason tournaments, how that's going to affect them, or if it really affects Coach Borndame and his squad at all. Of course, they haven't really released the spring schedule, so we don't know who they're going up against at home this season. But all around, I think they've replaced a lot of great players or some talented freshmen, and of course, grad transfers this year. So it's going to be an interesting team this year to kind of gauge their efforts. Will they still finish in the top 25 this year or not?
I think it's going to be fun. I mean, just to see how they play with the new roster and the new unit. Coach Jimmy is going to be a blast to interview because he's going to have a great, awesome job working up these new players in the system. Going to be fun to watch. And I actually spoke with him a couple weeks ago, and you can tell he's very passionate, very excited about this. So we'll see how it all works out for men's tennis. But guys, any other sports action? I know soccer's been in the works, and there's also been some other stuff with softball getting prepared. Any other sports that we're missing out on that you guys want to discuss?
Softball is doing a great job, especially in these scrimmages they've been playing. I think I went to one a few weeks ago. They played a smaller JUCO school. I can't remember the name of the program, but
Snead State?
Snead State,
Yeah.
yes, that's correct. They put up some points.
They did.
I think it was like 19 something.
19-1, I
One?
believe.
Yeah. Yeah, they
Crushed 'em.
Did a great job. And then they played Lipscomb,
Yes.
and then they played
Weber State? Or that might be wrong, actually.
Ball State. Ball State. They played
yes,
Ball State
yes.
too.
Ball State.
So Ball State. So they did win all those games, and I believe they went undefeated in all the scrimmages.
Yeah, I think so. I think
Yeah.
they may have lost their last one, but
Yeah.
besides that, they were pretty much unstoppable. And we've talked a lot
Yeah.
about them, especially like Matt's a huge softball
Yeah.
fan, so he loves talking about the softball team. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, no, they're a really good team this year, as we've mentioned so many times, and it's gonna be interesting to see how they do in the spring.
Yeah.
Last year, Laura Mueller, of course, was dominant force on offense, and she transferred to UT. And
Yep.
Gretchen Mead going from the mound to the dugout has been obviously working well for the coaching staff. So they've done a great job, kind of turning the teams around and getting ready for the new season.
Yep. Claire Woods brings it on the mound. She brings
Yeah.
it. Yeah. So, they played Alabama last year. In that regional,
Yeah.
Yeah, the regional.
and they played about 4 games. Didn't they lose the
I
fourth?
think so. They got it to a do or die game 5, I believe.
Yeah, game 5.
They had to beat
Yeah.
Bama twice.
Yeah.
That final day.
But they did a really good job, especially coming out of the CUSA, and you're playing an SEC school.
Yeah.
And one of the top SEC softball programs in the nation. So, number 1. Except for, Florida State and Oklahoma.
Yeah.
So,
I'd say Tennessee as well. But
yeah, Tennessee.
Yeah. Tennessee. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm glad you mentioned Clara Woods because we haven't really touched on her as much in this podcast. So I was excited to see that because she's a really, really solid player as well. And again, just a very talented roster. Going to be fun to watch softball. But I do want to talk about my sport, the one that I love calling and love talking about. That is soccer. So let's talk some football, if you will. So the CUSA regular season, guys, it's coming to a close. Not a lot of matches left. In fact, Friday will be the last match for at least 2 programs, and I think a couple more as well, because Middle Tennessee plays FIU this Friday. I'll be on the call if you want to check in on ESPN Plus, 7 o'clock. Should be fun. But right now, the top team in CUSA going into this is New Mexico State. 5-0-2 in CUSA, 8-5-3 overall. And they've done it in an interesting fashion because they only score an average of 1.5 goals per game. So they're not the most explosive offense in the world, but one of their greatest strengths is to adapt to the play style of their opponents. And that's been really impressive. You still got some great superstars, though, like Loma McNeese, 32 goals, even though the offense has been somewhat limited. But you've also got Bianca Chacon, who leads the CUSA in assists with 7. Next best player has 5, so she's really, really good. But the fun thing about this whole system is that there are a lot of teams that could potentially win the championship this year. You've got Liberty, you've got FIU, you've got Western Kentucky, who's come out of nowhere. They've won 3 straight matches after being basically a non-factor. So, I think a lot of us had forgot about them, and all of a sudden, they're right there in the thick of things. So, right now, I gotta say that it's gonna be a dead heat coming down to the end. And I think that this match between Middle Tennessee and FIU could mean more than we think, because if Middle defeats FIU, they will drop drastically in the CUSA tournament, which is coming out the 1st through the 5th in Ruston. So it's going to be a fun sprint to the finish, and you got to say, postseason soccer in CUSA looking mighty interesting this year. I think it could be the best one we've had in years.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
I think so.
Just competition's that good, or what's driving that?
I think it's just the competition is evened up right now, and it's fun because a lot of these programs were not at the level that they are now. They weren't at that last year. Like FIU, they won a total of 3 matches last year. Now they're 8-4-4. They are a much better team. They've rounded into form. They've capitalized on their offensive firepower. and it feels like there's a lot more parity overall in the conference. Liberty has been somewhat tested after being undefeated for over a year. Now they've come in and started to struggle against some tougher teams. New Mexico State, in their first year in the conference, has all of a sudden taken it by storm. I think overall, it's just a lot more even, and there's so many great different play styles that just makes it exciting to watch. So you never know what you're going to get out of a CUSA soccer game, and that's what I love about it this season. It's just awesome. I mean, it's a blast if you think about it. It's just I can't even. You just gotta watch it yourself. You gotta watch it yourself. Because
yes, soccer is definitely a back-to-back game. Like a lot of people that I know don't like soccer, but I feel like it's probably the most intense sport that you will play because you're just running up and down, up and down, up and down. I mean, a lot of guys will get winded out there. Like I would get winded.
It's a patience thing.
Yeah.
It's a longer field than hockey, right? Playing on a hockey rink.
Yeah.
Kind of you'll get the same thing. You might wind up with a 1-0 score, same thing with soccer, but it's the entertainment factor, and for some reason I think people just don't have the patience for it. At least maybe in this particular area, they'd rather watch hockey than soccer.
True.
Both sports have their entertainment factors that allow and kind of appease their crowd.
I mean, I didn't know a whole lot about soccer like last year when I first started, but the more and more I've done it, the more and more I've learned about it, the more and more entertaining it gets. So, I mean, just tune in, take a look at a match, and I think that you'll find there's a lot of enjoyment out of it. So, Middle Tennessee versus FIU this Friday, the final regular season match of the season for the Blue Raiders, and it's going to be senior day too, so the seniors are going to get recognized. It's going to be an emotional send-off for them, and guys, I think no matter what sport it is, senior day, that gives you some extra motivation to go out there and give one final awesome performance.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So we'll see how all that works out. And, before we go off for the last time on this episode, I do want to mention, because we're getting into the final week of the season, we've talked a lot about, throughout this podcast, throughout these episodes, about who is going to come home with the bacon, who's going to get the championship in football. And with only 4 games left, has anything changed for you guys? We've mentioned a lot about Liberty being the top contender. Do you think anybody like a Jacksonville State or even Western Kentucky, if they somehow win tonight, is going to be a challenge to them?
I think, once again, you just got to look at who has been consistent on both sides of the ball, including special teams as well. And Liberty has been that team hands down this entire season. And I don't know if there's even a close second. If I had to guess, I'd still say defensively Jacksonville State has been one of the predominant teams for this year, and being unfortunately going to be ineligible because coming in, this is their first year in the FBS. I would say if it weren't for that, I'd say give it to them already. So looking down at that, you probably have to say, can New Mexico State and Diego Pavia make a run for their money, try to finish off the season on a high note, maybe finish with 9 wins, and just have an offensive battle with Liberty, trying to avoid those mistakes, because Liberty, of course, has one of the top defensive backfields, leading the nation in interceptions for the season already. So it's one of those teams that you just got to be wary of when you're airing it out. So I'd say New Mexico State, the Aggies.
New Mexico State, okay. I think New Mexico State's a team that can definitely shock a lot of people, because you wouldn't think of them as an offensive firestorm, but the more and more we've seen them throughout this season, the better and better they've gotten. And Diego Pavia, I mean, this may be a bit of an overreaction, but I think he's one of the best players in Conference USA. Yeah. I mean, when you look at his totality of work, and I think Ethan, without him, this New Mexico State team would not even be close to what they are, to be honest.
Yep. They definitely wouldn't be wait, so what was the question again?
I think it's a statement. It's just a statement.
I think he's just telling you how
I just wanted you to hear it. I was like, Ethan, I want you to hear this, because Diego Pavia, this stuff needs to be known throughout the land. So that's what I wanted you to know, and I think it's pretty cool to see. So, oh, by the way, what do you guys think of my new haircut?
You're wearing a hat.
Well, I thought you could see through it, maybe.
You're wearing a hat. Why are you asking about a haircut if you're wearing a hat? Take off your hat.
Okay. What do you think?
Okay, it looks good. You're fine. You're fine.
Well,
show the audience. Show the audience. Show the audience. Take the hat off again. There you go. There's Dylan's haircut that he decided to wear a hat and then talk about his hair.
That's my thing.
I know, but talk about a haircut and then not take your hat off.
I don't know, man.
Dude, I need a haircut.
I just wanted to see what you guys had to say, because I've had people say some different things about it. So I was like, should I keep it or should I not? I don't know.
Well, you already got the haircut. It's kind of hard to not keep it.
Well, I mean, I guess you can't. You have to keep it now, but I was like, do I want to keep it for the future?
Yeah.
Got to make future considerations,
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Just, well, you know, I value your opinions, and I wanted to see what you had to
You
say.
shouldn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So before we go, any more loose ends that we want to tie up before we send it off?
I don't get my hair cut. I dye my hair invisible.
Tie your hair invisible. Are you guys gonna dress up next week for the show?
Do you want us to?
I mean, I'm not gonna say no. If you're on,
Are you gonna dress up?
I probably will, to be honest.
Then I guess we probably should.
I mean, I'm gonna do it for Sports Bowling, so I might as well do it for CUSA All Access.
Well, currently Louisiana Tech leads New Mexico State 16-10
At the house.
Okay.
at the half, and then Western Kentucky's down against Liberty.
I think they're on the
14-2.
move right now. I think they're inside Liberty's red zone.
Yeah, they are.
That's
First
gonna be
and
an
10,
interesting game.
Liberty 18.
I mean, I feel like if Western wins, they could have an. It's a tough track, but maybe a track to get to the championship game. They got to hope Jacksonville State loses one or two, but
Yeah.
that's going to help them out a lot. If they don't win, though, I think it's almost set in stone. It's going to be Jack State versus Liberty. So there's a lot riding on this game. Or am I wrong about that? Maybe it's New Mexico State. I forgot they've only got one loss in CUSA play.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, it's also because Jacksonville State will be ineligible for.
Oh, that's right. They're ineligible.
Yeah.
Man, I'm gonna be honest. I think that's a dumb rule. I get why.
Well,
but-
I don't like it either.
It kind of bit. Well, who was it? Bellarmine.
Bellarmine, yeah.
Last year, of course, playing at the Atlantic Sun, and
Yeah.
Jacksonville State wound up taking their place. But yeah, because they were ineligible, having to be on probation, you're not allowed to have any kind of postseason
That's
play.
right.
Yeah.
So
Them and James Madison, 2 peas in a pod.
Yeah.
Man, that hurts. Well, I feel bad for Jacksonville State, but your time will come. Your time will come. And but no matter what happens, it's going to be an interesting postseason and interesting last month of play in November. But I think that's going to do it today for CUSA All Access. So thank all of you great people for tuning in here today for the show. That's Ethan Odom. Great to have you on the show. By the
Thank
way,
you.
he's got some great video content. Check out his social media. You're on Instagram, I believe. Are you on Twitter as well?
Yep, Twitter as well.
Okay,
It's
gotcha.
I
Oh,
am
yeah,
Ethan
X.
O. DeGreat.
Ethan O. DeGreat. Anyway,
Yes, sir.
great stuff. He makes great content, and he does the scoop as well for Blue Raider Extra Points. So make sure to check out that when the show returns in about a week or so. But that's going to do it for today. So for Ethan Odom and Ryan Martinelich, I'm Dylan Simmons. We will see you next week for our Halloween episode. Remember to always have an electric night.
having a haircut and not showing the haircut, that's hilarious.